All right, everyone, welcome to Strictly Sports. Today we're doing our preview on the New York Mets, welcoming Stephen Cashin as always, and a special guest today. We've got John DeStefano, Mr. Mets fan, here to talk about the Mets. How you guys doing?
I'm
Doing
doing
good.
great.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me, man.
All right, yeah, for sure, guys. So we've got a lot to talk about with the New York Mets, and this is a team. Stephen and I have recorded the other four teams in the division, and we just told each other this is the team we want to talk about because there are so many things that could happen with this team. First of all, we'll address it right off the bat. Noah Syndergaard is out for the season with Tommy John. Really unfortunate. I mean, if he had been here, I would have said the Mets are the runaway favorites for this division. Now that he's not in the rotation, I would say that they're still probably going to win the division. It's just not as clear cut. But let's just start with that projected lineup. The projected lineup I saw, and this is the one thing with the Mets, you could do like 50 different lineup projections for this team, and they could all be pretty good lineups. The one I have here is Jeff McNeil leading off, then Wilson Ramos, Pete Alonso, Conforto, J.D. Davis, Robinson Cano, Ahmed Rosario, and then Brandon Nimmo. There's been other people that have Nimmo leading off. I don't particularly think that would be smart. I think Nimmo is severely underperformed at the plate during his career, not necessarily a leadoff guy. I think McNeil, a guy that can get base hits basically whenever, is more of a guy that you would want in that leadoff position. But, John, I'll defer to you here. What do you see from this lineup?
Well, actually, I really like what you just said. I like the lineup you just stated. I definitely like having Alonso in the three holds where he belongs, batting in front of Conforto. McNeil absolutely deserves to lead off. He's earned it. He's batted over 300 now twice. Nimmo needs to find his way back into the higher spots in the lineup. He batted around 200 last year, really injury-plagued season. Kind of been the story the last couple of years from him. We're really not sure what to do with Brandon anymore. I mean, he's a great fielder when he plays, and he was a quality hitter, at least for a short time there around 2018. But last year, like I said, an injury-plagued season really kind of took him out of the lineup for good. But I do like the rest of the lineup you have set up, though. Wilson Ramos was a revelation for me last year. I was not expecting him to do nearly as well as he did. He doesn't hit for any power. The man cannot hit the ball for an extra base hit, but every time he connects, he gets a single. So if he can keep doing that, I miss having a power hitting catcher on the team. But I think what he lacks in defensive ability more than makes up for with eye-hand coordination at the plate because he knows how to get the bat on the ball. So I really like having Ramos in the two hole there. Other than that, yeah. I mean, if Rosario keeps hitting the way he did last season, though, I think actually I'd bat him higher than eighth. I'd probably put him 7 or 6. I especially like having speed on the base paths from him.
What do you think of Robinson Cano? Because he had 15 home runs, 39 RBIs, I believe it was, and that was in reduced time. I think he had 50 games that he didn't play, and I was thinking, you add 50 games to his schedule, maybe he's a 20 homer second baseman still.
Absolutely. Cano hasn't lost it. I mean, yeah, he's not the same 30 home run guy we were used to seeing with the Yankees and the Mariners, but he's still Robinson Cano. This guy might be a fringe Hall of Famer one day. He's a good guy to have in the middle of the lineup, and I expect more from him next year. I think he's going to be back to a 25 plus home run stat.
Yeah, and Steven, what are you thinking with this lineup here?
It has a ton of potential. Like we just hit on, Wilson Ramos has been, last 4 seasons, he's batted 288, batted 337 in Philadelphia, split season there with Tampa and Philly. He batted 297 in Tampa, 2017 batted 290. So a guy who really can, in the catching spot, you don't really see too much production anymore. Weaker position. A guy who really finds a way to get on base, like John said, and that's a spot where if you have a catcher that produces, it's a great thing to have in your lineup. Cano, he's he's always producing every year, getting on base, one of the best swings in baseball, in my opinion. And then you look at Pete Alonso, a guy who just really, shocked everyone. 53 homers, 120 RBIs, walked 72 times. I mean, batted 260. Average doesn't matter. He produced. Showed what he can do to the whole league. And you look at the small pieces in the lineup. Conforto batted 257, 33 homers, 92 RBIs. McNeil could be a strong leadoff batter for the Mets. So I mean, the production will be there for this team. I mean, you can shuffle this lineup 10 different ways, which makes them so lethal. You can put a Pete in the second spot to give him more at bats, maybe late in the game.
Right.
So,
Yeah, because
it's exciting.
obviously, the Yankees hit Judge second, the Angels hit Trout second. That seems to be a trend where, these superstar power hitters are hitting in the two hole.
Yeah, I mean, in spring training too, they put up Pete in the second spot. I think one game I went to, they put him there. I mean, he got 4 at bats in the first 6 innings. So you look at it, you want the more you can get these, superstars up to the plate. Later in the game, maybe they get you, a big base hit to get you a couple runs to win you a ball game. So you're seeing that more as a trend as of late in the league. But I like this lineup, and they could be very dangerous this year.
For sure. And John, what is your opinion on JD Davis?
Well, I love JD Davis, to be honest with you. I think it's really difficult. He found himself in a really difficult spot last year where he was kind of fighting for a fielding position. And now I think he's secured it in left field. We don't know what's going to happen. We still don't know what's going to happen with Cespedes if he's coming back this season.
Yeah.
And Dom Smith is an absolute liability in left field, which we've seen when he plays. So there's no question for me that, he was fantastic last year. JD Davis at the plate, his pop was really good. He's an excellent fielder. I would love to have him in the lineup every single day as my regular left fielder.
Yeah, and I was thinking about that, and this is what we're talking about with this versatility of this Mets lineup. Let's say hypothetically, Cespedes does come back and he starts raking. Well, then you have an odd man out situation where you don't necessarily know what you're going to do. I was thinking maybe if Cespedes were to come back, you could move JD Davis back to third base and potentially play McNeil in right field if Nimmo is still struggling. Is that something that might be able to happen for them?
Yeah, I mean, the nice thing is McNeil is such a utility guy. I mean, he's a natural third baseman, but he is certainly more than capable of playing right field. In fact, he has a pretty good arm when he plays out there as well. He's gotten an assist out there from right field as well. So it's not like you're losing anything by moving either Conforto or Davis around if you have to accommodate a Jeff McNeil. Because it's, I definitely want Cespedes coming back. I mean, he's definitely the best non-Juan Lagares fielder they've had in quite a while. And speaking of Juan Lagares, his departure was not really too upsetting to too many Mets fans because he talked about a liability at the plate.
He's been there forever too,
and he has. But the thing was, he was quite a long way from his Gold Glove year in, what was it, 2014, I think it was. So it's again with an outfield as stacked as it is right now, where players are fighting for positions. He was definitely the weakest link in the outfield. I think he batted under 200 last season.
Yeah, not good. And this might be the first team that we've done so far that we actually bring up the bench. Do the Mets have the best bench in baseball? I mean, at one point you could have Cespedes, Dom Smith, Jed Lowry on that bench. Those are some pretty good, and again, Lowry's dealt with some health issues, same with Cespedes, but if those guys are at their peak value, that's a dang good bench.
Yeah, for sure. And then sorry about that. You also picked up Jake Marisnick
right
season 2. So you look at the depth that they got, and someone doesn't pan out or they're struggling, you could put one of these guys in. You put Lowry in there. You put Marisnick in there. I mean, you have a ton of things to play with here with this lineup, and so this is why I have them in the first spot in the division. They can be scary because they have this depth.
For sure, and that's about all we can say about the offense. I mean, this is really a great offensive lineup, but the pitching is really where it is for the Mets. And the lineup, I would say, actually, going back to that, it is probably the best lineup in the division. But then you look at the rotation with Syndergaard, it would have been arguably one of the best rotations in baseball. You take him out of it, it's still a very above average rotation, just not the best. But you have DeGrom, Stroman, Porcello, Matz, Waka. Those are 5 guys that they can go out there, especially, of course, DeGrom and Stroman. Those are the 2 guys that lead it. But Matz, Porcello, and Waka can go out there, throw 5 or 6 innings a night, 3 or 4 runs, and then they can give it to that bullpen. So I think we know what we're getting out of DeGrom and Stroman. It's those other 3 guys that are going to have to make it up for Syndergaard. So what do you think about that, John?
Well, I really like the Porcello signing. I think he brings veteran leadership to the rotation. He's been there, he's done it. He won 20 games for the Red Sox. You know, he's a quality pitcher who I think it's really it explains that we have a mature rotation, which is unusual for a Mets rotation, where they have guys who have been stars and they've been stars for a while. Like DeGrom's not as young as he used to be anymore. He's not the young phenom now. He's a two-time Cy Young winner and he's a veteran. Stroman's been in the league for 5 or 6 years. Porcello, I think, is 32. I think Waka is turning 33 this year. Steven Matz is also over 30. So that not only do they have a strong lineup, they have a lineup, a strong rotation. They have a rotation of pitchers that have been there and they've seen it. I think there's a maturity to this rotation that I haven't seen from a Mets rotation in recent memory. Yes, the loss of Syndergaard is hurtful, but it's not devastating. I think they definitely still vie for the division, if not, maybe even the second round of the playoffs.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Again, like you said, I mean, I'll just use your quote. I mean, it just doesn't destroy the team that Syndergaard is gone. You can make up for that kind of a next man up type of mindset where you can get the same production out of multiple pitchers and not just relying on Syndergaard. And what's really going to help the Mets here, their bullpen is strong. And it really does depend on guys coming back, a lot like Cespedes and Lowry. They're going to need guys to come back this year and be the guys they've been in the past. You have Edwin Diaz, who they acquired with Robinson Cano in the trade with Seattle last year, coming over. Let's just say it, he was pretty terrible last year. I mean, he was basically a walking run out there on the mound last year. But if he can come back and be the guy that he was in 2018, that's enormous for the Mets. And then you signed Dellin Betances, former Yankee, was always tremendous in that bullpen. At closer, he was never really the best. He was always better used in a seventh or eighth inning role. The Mets could use him as a closer. They could not. They also have Juris Familia. They have Seth Lugo. They have Justin Wilson. They have Robert Gazelman. That is a bullpen that can really carry a team. What are your guys' views on the bullpen, Steven?
Yeah, so I mean, you look at like we were just talking about now, Syndergaard being out. Sometimes that brings out the best. It sounds crazy. It brings out the best in some of your pitching staff. I mean, guys have to step up to the plate, and guys have to get there and and work harder because they have to fill such a big gap. Looking at his bullpen, you have Betances, who was coming off a whole year off after injury. Guy who's dominant with the Yankees, having a 2.7 ERA in 2018, 2.8 ERA in 17. A guy who really, dominated, being a setup guy. Even can fill in that closing role at some points, giving Chapman a night off in New York. And then you have Edwin Diaz and Juris Familia, guys who struggled last year to find roles in that closing spot. Definitely look for them to have bounce back years and really and pick up some slack from last year. But they've got good stuff, and they can definitely contribute and eat up a whole lot of innings. And then you got guys like Brad Brock. He had a 5.47 ERA last year, 60 strikeouts. Played for the Cubs, but that was a good signing, just good depth.
Yeah, because he's a vet. He's been around the league.
Yeah, good depth signing for that bullpen. So definitely some good things going in that Mets bullpen.
What are your views on the pen, John?
Well, I'm glad we finally got to the pen because this is actually my favorite part of the team right now. As a Mets fan, I might say this is the best bullpen I've ever seen this team have. I think it's the most complete bullpen in baseball. I know that's a bold statement, but top to bottom, there are no holes. I do. There's one question mark for me, and I think it's probably one of the biggest question marks for anyone when you look at this team, and it's Edwin Diaz for sure. I'd like to think that last year is an aberration. You didn't see anything like this from him in his first 5 years in Seattle, and it just wasn't anywhere even remotely close. He just couldn't find his. I think he gave up 5 ninth-inning home runs last year, which is unthinkable as a closer, especially one that was coming off the best season of his career. So I do question him, but having guys like Robert Gazelman, who's been on the team, who's a clubhouse guy, who's an excellent reliever. Seth Lugo was one of the best relievers in all of baseball last year. He was the reliever of the month, I think, in July. Um, Justin Wilson, I'm excited about. He's a really quality reliever. But I'll tell you what, my dark horse actually in the lineup is an underplayed guy. I think it's Jacob Rame, a really young guy who just came up
Okay.
last year. But I really like. I think he only appeared in like 5 or 6 games, but he was an excellent while he pitched. He got himself into one bad spot. I think he gave up a couple of runs, but he was lights out otherwise. He's a high strikeout guy, and I'd love to see him come in spots, like 2 or 3 innings in setup positions. That when either Lugo or Justin Wilson aren't available.
Oh yeah, and that's something you have to think about too with these bullpens is, these guys can't pitch every single day. So it's always really important to have those one or two guys on the outside that can kind of relieve those other relievers, so to say. And the same thing kind of with the Yankees is that they have those 6, 7, 8, 9 guys, but when one of those guys can't go, they have Chad Green, Jonathan Loizaga waiting. Those are guys that can also pitch the 6th through 9th innings, and that's what the Mets have as well. When you might have, let's say, the 7, 8, 9 that ends up being Betances, Familia, Diaz. Well, you still have Lugo and Gazelman and Rain and Brad Brock to pitch for those guys if they're unavailable. So that's what I would. I don't know about the best bullpen in baseball, John, but it's definitely top 2 or 3, right there with the Dodgers. I would say the Yankees. I would say Atlanta's up there. I think the Mets bullpen is better than Atlanta's, but it's top 3 for sure.
Yeah, and it's really surprising because you're not used to seeing that complete of a rotation on a Mets team. There, the past 5 years or so, there's been plenty of holes in their rotation, but they've done a good job the last 2 years, especially of adding some quality adding some quality relievers to the ones they already had. I know they brought up Seth Lugo, but they traded for Gazelman, they traded for Brock, and they believe they also traded for. And of course, they traded for Diaz. Even though Diaz hasn't worked out, he has shown signs of his old brilliance. He wasn't, completely, useless last year. He did get himself in some pretty bad spots. But I think if he, closes his own question mark, I think they will. Honestly, I do think they're the best line of bullpen in baseball.
So I get that's a perfect segue, John. I mean, you look at this bullpen and with the blown saves they had last season in the 8th and 9th innings. Steve and I were talking about this before the show. You take away maybe 25% of those blown saves, and this team makes the playoffs last year.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they finished just a couple of games out of the division, and if you take away just Edwin Diaz's blown saves by himself, they're a playoff team. It's so surprising to see that from such a quality starter. Like I said, if he can, shore himself up and get himself back together and find the Edwin Diaz that had a sub-2 ERA in 2018, this team's going to be just fine. But again, he remains, the biggest question mark that they're facing. And it may take another retooling of the closing / spot setup / roles for either like a Juris Familia or, Seth Lugo can go in a long closing role. He's come in to get 6 outs before. So, if it takes something like that, I'd like to think that, with the new management, we're going to have quicker hooks than Mickey Callaway will with his relievers. It's interesting because he was so quick to take out his starters, but he would leave relievers in to get shelled, which didn't make any sense to me when they just didn't do it. So, I'd like to think that this time around we'll see a much different strategy when it comes to using relievers. I like to think that, for me, if I was, a pitching coach or if I was managing right now, I'd probably have 2 guys up more often than not. And I'd like to send out, if I have 2 right-handers up, I want to send out the guy who just has it best that day. And I don't think that's done enough in baseball where they choose guys based on specific matchups when they should be choosing guys based on how well they're pitching that day.
Yeah, that's something that's really been lost in baseball, and this is something that just from a personal experience with the Yankees. I mean, Aaron Boone had his scheduled days off for a lot of his position players, and even if a player was in a hot streak, if he had his scheduled day off, he was getting the day off. And I think that's something that is really a problem around baseball. It's like if your guy is doing well, keep pitching him or keep putting him in that lineup.
Yeah,
Yeah, I agree.
100%. I mean, it's just like you all hit the, great points. I mean, most guys want to look at matchups and just not ride the hot hand. I think all of our teams. I mean, being a Rays fan too, it's like John, you said, you know, our managers pull our starting pitchers quicker than they do with guys that are out there trying to finish the game. If you give a couple base runners, I don't want you out there. You're literally leaning to lose this game, and I think you got to ride the hot hand every night. I get it. Okay, if you've pitched 10 game, I mean not 10 games in a row, but if you're out there 9 out of the 10 games, yeah, you need a day off. But if your guy's rolling, you got to ride it out. You got to win games. Every game in the major league counts. And you look at the end of the season, the Mets finished 3 games out of the wild card spot. Look how many games that could have been won if you made the right decision. In certain games.
Yeah, guys, and comparing this Mets team with the other teams in the division, because we can do that now that we've filmed the rest of this division. I look at the Mets and I say lineup power. I have a really tough time because you look at Atlanta, which is probably the team, either them or the Nationals, that are going to be right there with the Mets, and you say, well, the Braves have more thump in that lineup than the Mets do, arguably. Freeman, Acuna, Albies is a stronger big three than Alonso, Conforto, McNeil. It's very close, but Atlanta has the edge. But then you look at the rest of Atlanta's lineup, and we've gone over this 5 through 9. Atlanta doesn't really have that. The Mets are good top to bottom, not just in the starting lineup, but they also have guys on the bench. So I look at it and I say where the top heavy star power might be with Atlanta and might even be with maybe Washington with Turner and Soto, the Mets total lineup and that entire team, I think, is better than Atlanta's. Am I wrong here?
I don't think so at all, Jacob. I do. I mean, obviously, I have to agree that Atlanta is the lineup that scares you the most. I mean, I'm for one, I'm the most afraid of Ronald Acuna. I mean, that guy's probably one of the best young prospects hitting a baseball I've seen in recent memory. I mean, it's just an unbelievable rookie season. Without Pete Alonso, he would have been the runaway rookie of the year in any other season. But I think that, even though it is a lineup that frightens you, I think the Mets have a lineup that produces runs more consistently. Because like you said, they are top to bottom just a little bit better. Even though they do lack power at certain positions, like you said, Wilson Ramos doesn't really hit for power at all. Neither does Ahmed Rosario, but the other guys in the lineup, hit for extra bases, hit home runs. It's not, the scariest lineup in baseball, and it's certainly not the one that, produces the most power. But I think consistently, again, this is a rare sight for Mets fans, but I think we actually have a consistent lineup built at this point that is good for getting more than singles.
Yeah, I mean, what's your view, Stephen, on the outlook compared to the rest of the division for the Mets?
Like John just hit around the head. I mean, they can 1 through 9. You look at who can produce. You have, Pete Alonso can really drive in a ton of runs, and then you got guys who really, are role players and find a way to, put the pieces together. Wilson Ramos catching in the catching spot can bat 6, 7, or 8 and really drive in some runs there. And then you look at, the Braves who really look for like that home run ball. They look for, little pieces in the lineup of like they have 3 or 4 guys that can really do it. But then you look at platoon guys, 5 through 9, can they do it? There's a big question mark there. But for the Mets there, I mean, last year there was a stretch there for 15 games where they were just lighting it up and they were scoring 7 or 8 runs a game and they were just shutting people down, and it was fun to watch. And they were patient. So I think that gives them the edge in this division, is that they can go 1 through 8 in the lineup and really roll it through consistently.
Agreed on everything, guys. And so now it's time for our favorite part, over under on wins and where we have them finishing in the division. I have them winning the NL East. I have them at 92 wins. What about you guys?
Man, that bold, I think. To be honest with you, I would have agreed with you for sure. If Syndergaard was healthy, I think taking him out, being the guy that he is, I think he's probably worth 4 or 5 wins in any season he plays. So I think right now they're probably best over under would be like an 89. And I think that would be their number. I think 89 or 90 would probably be the max total for this season.
All right. Do you have them winning the division?
I don't know if I have them winning the division, but I do think they squeak into a wild card spot. I think Atlanta is still very strong. And I do think that I think their talent wins out at the end of the year. But I think if they beat out the Mets, it's only by 1 or maybe half a game. And I definitely think the Mets will be in line for the wild card spot. One of the two.
Yeah, that's the thing with this division, man. I mean, you're going to have probably the top 2 teams at the very least making the postseason. So, you don't necessarily have to win the division. It's just always a luxury to win the division. So you don't have to play that 1-game wild card game. What about you, Steven?
I've got about 90 wins. I think that's the right number for them. I think, like John said, 89, 90 is right around where they're going to be. But I have them winning the division. I didn't have them up there a couple days ago. But after looking at this team, I think they're complete. Based off their starting pitching, their bullpen, pitching wins you games in baseball. And I think they have what it takes to really win 90 plus games. And I look at the Braves, and their biggest question mark is their pitching. Can they piece together a whole season? I don't think they can. So I think the Mets will end up winning the division. Then I have the Nats right behind them. So I think it's going to be a really good race between them and Washington this year. Looking at last year's standings, Milwaukee finished with 89 wins and got that second wild card. The Mets were right there. And I think if you give the Mets 15 more games, I think they squeak it in. And look at St. Louis; they won 91 games and won their division. So it's going to be really exciting this year. I think the Mets are going to, really surprise a lot of people, and I think they're going to be really exciting to watch this coming season.
Yeah, agreed, guys. And the reason I have them winning the division is I just look at the total roster. I say lineup in totality is probably the best in the division. Rotation is second best, I would say. If Syndergaard's there, it's tied with the Nats. Right now, it's probably second in the division. And then bullpen is best in the division. So I think they're really good in every area. You look at the Braves and you say, well, lineup, good, not good, bottom half. You say rotation, bullpen is above average. And then you look at the Nats and you say below average lineup, really good rotation, above average bullpen. So I think the most complete team overall is the Mets, and that's how I look at it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's you look at the division. That's how. I mean, I think there's not a hole in there. So I mean, even like you can go down the stretch of it, but they could be the second seed in in the NL. I mean, obviously the Dodgers are so top heavy. No one's catching them after winning 106 games last year. So I mean, if everything goes right for the Mets, they can. I think 90s is the benchmark for them. I mean, they can go as high as 93 wins, in my opinion. So, we'll see. But it's just baseball is just such a war of attrition. Who stays healthy? Who are they going to get the same numbers as they got last year from Alonso and Ramos? Who's going to come out and really replicate what they did the previous year?
For sure, guys. So that'll do it here for our New York Mets season preview. It's going to be a wild season if it's played. We hope it is. You can listen to us on a bunch of different platforms, including YouTube. You can look up all the links to this stuff by going and following our Twitter at Strict Sports FAU. That's STRICT SPORTS FAU. And you can find our link to our Spotify channel on there. And we're also on a bunch of other platforms as well now, including Anchor, Radiocasts, and many more. And we're hoping to get on Apple Podcasts soon. So the next video that you guys will hear on here will be the defending World Series champion season preview of the Washington Nationals. And then after that, you'll get a video previewing the Pittsburgh Pirates. And you'll also be getting daily NBA season preview videos as well. So thank you guys. Thank you, John. Thank you, Steven, for coming on. and we will see you guys next time.